One. Good evening, parents. Old River Knightsen School. I want to welcome you to a question and answer session that we have going on tonight. It's myself, Mr. Yurkovich, the principal superintendent of Knightsen School. And also we have Ms. Polk, the special education director and principal of Old River, joining us tonight. I want to thank all the parents that were able to submit questions on our survey and questionnaire. Just have to reiterate how important it is that you check your email, because that's our primary mode of communication. And believe me, leading up to the restart of school, there's going to be a lot of messages going out, primarily about number one, first and foremost, safety. But the second part too is about scheduling and how school will work. So shall we begin? Last night at the board meeting, our board elected to bring back TK3, grades TK3 on March 8th. So starting not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, we're going to have TK3 back at school in a hybrid model. Now, we surveyed parents back in January. There's a number of families that elected to stay online, and you will stay online and distance learning. But we also have a number of families that want to come back in person. So we're going to have an AM and a PM cohort model that we'll talk about more in the future. As of right now, April 12th is a date we've designated for grades 4 to 6, and 7 and 8 will come back on April 12th or when we're in the red tier. And that red tier is anytime we're under 7 per 100,000 in the county. Vaccine question. I know when we created this presentation, we embedded the parent questions in there. So we should answer all of them with this presentation. Two of them were questions about required vaccines for kids and teachers. And to answer that is no, it is not a requirement at this time. Teachers just became eligible for vaccines in our county. It is not something that's required by the CDC. It's one of the enhanced procedures that we can follow, and we look forward to getting all of our educators and students vaccinated to help protect us. If you refer to our district website, you'll see the returning to school safely presentation. And there's two updates from the CDC from February 11th and February 12th. I consolidated them down into a presentation. You can watch the board meeting where I present it, or you can flip through the PowerPoint itself. If you look on the lower left-hand side, it's the CDC update, COVID transmission in schools reopening. So that, again, is located on our district webpage. Ms. Polk.
All right, so one of the most important things, we did address it last night in the board meeting, but one of the things that really we need to be aware of is this is a community event. It's not just us as a school. We're really working with you as our families for the district. So one of the things we wanted to make sure parents know about is the home symptom checker and what are the masking requirements coming to school. So one of the key things in making sure that we can mitigate the spread of COVID-19 at school is to engage in passive screening at home. Some of the symptoms that you'd want to be aware of as a parent would be anything over 100 degrees as far as a fever. If there's cough, shortness of breath, you can see all of the symptoms listed here. I know for things like, a sore throat or runny nose with allergy season coming up, that's some of the questions that we have been getting. And our guidance has really been, if there is in your gut a feeling that something is wrong, please keep your child at home. If your child becomes ill at school, we will also be contacting you to come pick them up. So mostly it's making sure to look at the symptoms. What are the symptoms? Are there multiple symptoms? And again, just making that best judgment, keeping your student at home if they are exhibiting symptoms. One of the things about masks to be aware of is to make sure that they are clean and that they are fitting well. So some of the things we have to make sure of is that they are covering your nose and that they come down. There's no gaps here, and that they're coming and covering your chin area as well. Think of it like being snug. That was our keyword, snug.
All right. One of the first things that came up in our parent questions were transporting kids to school. Because we have larger buses, that's going to work into our advantage. Students will be required to wear masks at all times while on the bus. We're going to strongly encourage students to keep the windows down to keep the air circulating through. Prior to coming on the bus, students will have to have hand sanitizer, and we're going to take a temperature check to make sure that they do not have a hot temperature. Every other seat will be marked off, so that'll help with spacing. Any family members will be encouraged to sit next to one another because they're in the same household. So you won't be able to sit next to your friends. You'll have to sit next to your siblings in the household. Routes will be round trip, so we will be offering bus routes in the AM cohort and the PM cohort. And if you have any questions or you need busing, please contact your school secretary and we can get you some more information. Busing is for our students that are within our district and are within our district. So the inter-district transfer students, you'll need to have rides to and from school. So with that, students that are being dropped off at school, we have to spread out. That's part of mitigating COVID in schools. You know, distance is our friend. So we've designated areas at Knightsen school by grade level. So we have a gate right next to our kinder class, and that's where the kinder kids will come and go. Right in between the main buildings, there's a gate where our grades 5 and 6 in special education will be dropped off and picked up. 7th and 8th graders, you'll come in through the gate at the front of the cafeteria. You'll enter in through the Serenity Garden area and come around to classrooms 2 and 3. For the rest of our students, grades 1 through 4, we're going to utilize the back pickup loop. So what this will do is spread our students out, and so there's not a whole lot of intermingling. And one of the things that we really need to stress is parents, you need to be here on time to pick up your children, because you know, if they're loitering and playing, and then if somebody comes down as sick, we have to contact trace, and we'll get more into what that entails. But part of our plan for reentry to school is spacing out students.
And just like at Knightsen, at Old River, we will also need to make sure that we have specific entry and exit points for our students. We've broken them up, taking into account the 3 main areas we have to access campus. So our TK through 2 will be entering into the left-hand side, very much near the flagpole. There's an entry and exit area there. Grades 3 and 5 will be this main gate here up front, outside of the office. And then 6 through 8 will be at that entrance closer to where the cafeteria would be. One of the main things I wanted to encourage parents to know, and I've kind of put it in this spray painted green area here, this whole front loop is a loading zone. And so again, making sure if you know where your entry and exit area is, we can help to spread out the traffic. Additionally, our parking lot is available for parents if they would like to park there, have their students use the crosswalk to be able to cross safely and get into their car to then exit. We may need to, again, as we reopen, revisit this plan, but right now this is our loading entry and exits. We will have signs designated for you as well to help keep the spread of students apart and to help maintain that social distancing. So one of the main things we get a lot of questions about so far is about arriving at school. What's happening? What's going on? So again, looking back at home, what can we do? Do that passive screening, making sure we are symptom-free of COVID-19, making sure we have our fitted masks. When students do come to school, they will be given a temperature check by their teacher. This is an example of what students will see. Outside of all of the classrooms, both at Knightsen and at Old River, we do have yellow dots that are spaced out, so that way students know exactly when they come on campus through their designated opening to go straight to their class, line up on a dot. When they enter the classroom, they will either be given hand sanitizer or be expected to wash their hands. We have soap and water sinks. Again, making sure that we are using those designated and assigned drop-off and pickup points. Students should not be congregating, especially if we have families that have multiple siblings. Make sure you guys figure out a good spot to be able to drop everyone off, pick everyone up safely. Again, report straight to class. And then bus riders, we did mention it in the busing slide here, but they will be screened prior to entering the bus as well. So what does our hybrid model look like throughout the district? We've gotten some questions as far as laptops versus paper and pencil. What does this even look like? What do kids need to bring? And we're really deferring you as families to the teachers. So some teachers, when their students are back, are really wanting to go right back to that pencil and paper. get rid of the laptops, and some teachers want to continue incorporating the laptops and the technology that they've been using to help maintain that consistency. You will hear more from your teachers about what's going to be expected within the classroom and what materials they will need to bring, but just know it may be different between younger and older grades. So how do those cohorts work? We have AM cohorts, PM cohorts, and online cohorts. What's going to happen is if you have signed up to be in person, you are either assigned to an AM or a PM cohort. And if you're an online, again, it's either going to be AM or in the PM. You will be giving or getting information from us in that little family outreach there. I put it there. So far, we've contacted those families that have been impacted by the scheduling conflicts. If they needed to change schools for one reason or another, or if they needed to change teachers one reason or another, those families are the only families so far who have been contacted. Next, we will be sending out a cohort identification letter from us. You will be able to identify if you've been scheduled into the AM or PM in-person cohort, or if you're online. And again, if it's AM or PM, all of the information as far as who the teacher is, what time will this class be, what are the expectations for class, and then you can additionally expect information from the teacher, again, about those specific materials, any Google Classroom Meet information, all of that will be from teachers. Those schedules for families with multiple siblings, we did schedule in just one cohort for you to be able to attend. One that might be a little bit different, maybe online. Again, if you have multiple students online, some may be in the morning, some may be in the afternoon. We don't quite know yet because it's going to be the teacher letting you guys know. Another question we got asked was, what physical activity are students able to do? So physical activity, again, it's going to be related to their classroom and what's available. Right now for our in-person cohorts, students are only going to be on campus anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours. And so we have to look at what are students able to do in that time. We do have some breaks. Some teachers have scheduled out snack breaks, some type of physical break. It's not going to be very much like what it was in the past with recess and everything. So just make sure to take into account that any type of physical activity or recess type of time will look different. Playground restrictions, we are unfortunately going to have to limit where we have students placed because we cannot have mixed groupings of students. And so teachers have been going through and identifying if they do have some type of play time, social time that is embedded in that, they are signing up for areas on campus where they will have their cohorts. So there was concerns that's come up obviously with scheduling as it would at any other time. Some students that do want to do in-person learning might have to transfer schools. Unfortunately, we are impacted in our ability to have a certain number of students in each cohort. That's just a safety guideline we have to make sure that we are implementing with fidelity. And as a result, some classes have fewer students, and that may be at a different school, and we are able to facilitate in-person learning at that site. The process for determining students that needed to be transferred, obviously our first priority is to make sure that we first looked at, are they able to stay with their teacher? Next, we looked at, is another teacher on their school site able to take them into their cohort? And if that wasn't able to happen, we then had to look across school district lines. And unfortunately, we did have to look first at our interdistrict transfer students, only because they are students that are coming into our district that are not necessarily a resident within our boundaries. So options, if students want to remain at their original school, we've had parents reach out to us so far when we were contacting them about changes. We've been able to talk with parents. In some cases, it's been able to work out, and in some cases, it hasn't. And so if you have any questions once you receive the information, I would highly suggest if you're an Old River parent, reach out to me. If you're a Knightsen parent, reach out to Mr. Yurkovich, and we'll be able to see if there are any options available or if our hands are tied given the circumstances. So if a student refuses to transfer, what are the options? Again, reach out to us as administrators, and we'll be able to follow up with you about what next steps may be available.
Classrooms. So we've had to do a lot of work in changing the way that classrooms look and how they operate in terms of being able to function in a COVID environment. With some of the mitigation strategies like distancing, we wanted to eliminate a lot of the common contact surfaces. We had to put sneeze guards in. So a lot of the non-essential furniture, the bean bags, the reading areas, we had to take out because those are areas that can potentially spread the virus. High touch items we're going to be restricting or removing. Upon entering the classroom, students will be required to wash their hands. We will schedule time in the school day for them to do this. This now has become a safety measure for our students. So we're literally going to teach them how to wash their hands. It's something that they'll do upon entering the classroom every time. It's something that they'll do upon returning from the bathroom. And it's one of the best defenses against spreading germs that can make us sick. Hand sanitizers will also be available on the buses and in every classroom. Hand sanitizers is second only to washing hands with soap and water. We'll have space for students to bring their belongings. We removed about half of the desks from all of the classrooms, so there's plenty of space. Students should bring their belongings with them each day. Each student workstation will have a sneeze guard just to help protect from that vapor. That's one thing that we learned, is the vapor from when we talk is one of the biggest ways that this virus is transmitted. So between a mask and a sneeze guard, it's a shield of protection, not only for your student, but for any staff member as well. Some of the arrangements in classes depended on the number of students. We have anywhere from 10 or 11 students in some of the smaller cohorts up to 16 or 17 students. The CDC guidelines are 6 feet is recommended, but no less than 4 feet in between desks. And so we predicated our classroom distancing off of the 6 feet, which is the safest, what the CDC has recommended. We tried to go with the single seat desks. We do not want students sitting next to one another. We measured out the square footage of the classrooms, and we understand it cannot be totally taken up with student desks, but we wanted to see how many students that we can fit into a classroom safely. And when each student comes onto campus, we do have spacing dots outside their classrooms. That's where they will need to report. They cannot go to the playground before class. We want them to report to class and wait for the beginning of school. With that, we want our parents to drop our students off as close to the start of school as you can, because if you're dropping off 10 or 15 minutes early, it's going to give the students, they'll want to go out and wander around, and that's something that we unfortunately cannot do right now. So some of the mitigation strategies that you would hear me talk about in last night's board meeting following the CDC guidelines is the consistent and correct use of masks. This is something that is our number one defense against the COVID-19 virus and spreading it. And quite honestly, it's a non-negotiable when returning to school. If a student is to return to school and if a staff member is to return to school, they must wear a mask. They can remove a mask if they're eating or drinking, but otherwise they need to have a mask. If they don't have one and they come to school, we can provide them with one. If you're a family in need, we do have some child-sized cloth masks that we can give you that are reusable. But not having a mask is not acceptable. We need you to have a mask, and we can provide them for you. If a student refuses to wear a mask, we will have to meet and discuss other options, because students without masks at school, it just will not work in this environment. Physical distancing, to the extent possible. We understand that students are going to get close to one another, but we have to have stable cohorting, meaning that we need to keep our students together, because should a student or staff member become ill with COVID, we have to contact trace and we have to report it to the county, not only who is sick, but who their close contacts were. And if we have a student that's intermingling with other cohorts, that has a potential to be very disruptive in terms of coming back to school. And we'll talk more about that later in this presentation. Again, hand washing is one of the best lines of defense against this in terms of touch surfaces. Respiratory etiquette. So if a student sneezes, they either need to sneeze into their elbow or they sneeze into a Kleenex. They throw the Kleenex away and immediately go wash their hands. They don't put the Kleenex on their desk. They don't put it in their pocket. They throw it away, get a fresh one, wash their hands, and then get a fresh one. We have re-established our cleaning routines with our custodians. They're cleaning the bathrooms several times a day. Door handles are getting cleaned every day. In between cohorts, AM and PM, Teachers will have their rooms cleaned and disinfected. We've increased the ventilation by bringing in as much fresh air as we can through our HVAC system. Teachers are also encouraged to leave their doors and windows open. We've also purchased in-room HEPA filters for every classroom and work area where children will be present. With the contact tracing, if your child is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes of somebody who is ill, they would be considered a close contact. That would require them to go quarantine at home for 14 days. If a student becomes sick with COVID-19 on a confirmed positive test, they would have to go into isolation for 10 days beyond their last symptoms. The reality of it is, yes, we are coming back, and this is a time to rejoice and celebrate. But should somebody come to school sick with COVID-19 and your child be a close contact, they will have to go home for 2 weeks. And it may involve the whole cohort. It may even involve the staff member. So this is a reopening, but it's all of our responsibility right now to make sure we are symptom-free while coming to school, because if we have sick people coming to school, that's really going to impact our ability to stay here with people being out on isolation and quarantine. One of the questions that we received from the parents were, will students and faculty need weekly COVID tests? If yes, how will that work? Well, we've contracted with a company that does rapid COVID testing. Our testing date right now is Tuesday, and we're doing it every week. Right now, we're starting the process with just staff members. I've taken them the last 2 weeks, and I've gotten my negative results, which is a confidence builder for me. A lot of our staff has been taking this. This is a service that will be opened up to our students and their families. So if you want to get a free COVID test, you can sign up. We'll provide you with a link. You can come down, fill out the paperwork, and they'll email you the results, usually within 2 days, by 72 hours or so. This is not mandatory, but again, this is one of the enhanced mitigation strategies the CDC has recommended. So once again, it's not required, but it's a service that we're offering on behalf of the school district to make sure that our students and families and staff remain safe. It is not the swab in the back of the nasal cavity. It is one that's just right at the front of the nose. It actually kind of tickles. It doesn't hurt at all. And we're proud to be able to offer that in our district. We've done a lot of work to make sure we can do that. And it is a great thing to ensure that everybody is COVID free.
So how do restrooms work on campus now, and what do the facilities look like? Here's a great picture identifying how our restrooms have changed a little bit. So we want to make sure that sinks and urinals are closed to ensure proper social distancing. Those that need to be closed, we have installed on both sites physical barriers in between sinks to make sure that, again, we are incorporating that distance, trying to stop as much as we can any type of droplets or vapor of any kind. Please note for your students, face masks are required while you are using the restrooms. They will be excused by their teachers one by one, and we also need to make sure that they're acting in the best interest of the community. Again, if they happen to be in the restroom at the same time as another student, practicing social distancing, making sure that they're washing their hands and utilizing those other hygiene skills that are required for us to remain open. So again, hand washing with soap and water will be required upon re-entering class. Doesn't mean that they didn't do it in the bathroom. We just have to make sure that once they're back in class, we again are being as safe as possible. And there are going to be signs posted in the restrooms, making sure, again, reminding them of those hand washings. And like I said earlier, teachers are going to excuse them one by one.
So restrooms and facilities continued. Old River has some bottle filling stations, and that was compliments of the ORPTC. They're coming in very handy right now, so students will be encouraged to bring their own water bottles, and they can fill them there at school. Knightsen, we do have the small water bottles that are up in the office, and we have a stock of them in our cafeteria as well. So if students need water and we're going to turn off the water fountains for obvious reasons, but students are encouraged to bring their own water, and if they need water, we can provide that for them. At Old River, they have the bottle filling stations. Playgrounds, If there is a small break, teachers will be able to schedule time outside. Remember, students are only going to be here for anywhere from 2.5 hours to 3 hours. There's not going to be a whole lot of time for playing. But I do know that physical activity and getting out should be part of the school day, and we're making provisions for that. But to have kids playing on the playground before and after school is not going to happen because we have to disinfect them in between cohorts. So like we said, it's going to be different. And this is something that I know is going to be very different. We'll have areas sectioned off by teacher and by class. I know some teachers have classroom activities, jump ropes and hula hoops that are marked by cohort, and they'll disinfect them at the end of the day. Playground equipment needs to be sanitized in between groups. So the day's going to be short and sweet. We're going to get a lot of classwork in on there, and we'll have some fun time outside, but it has to be very structured. So symptoms and quarantine and notification. I think this is probably one of the most important slides of the whole presentation, and it impacts every one of us. One of the things that we've learned with the COVID-19 disease is that it's a disease of the community. COVID-19 is brought to school. It's typically not transferred into schools as per the CDC. But our first line of defense is all of you at home. And if your child is sick, keep them home. You have to keep them home, because if they come to school and it comes down that they're COVID positive, it's a chain reaction. We have to send a bunch of people home on quarantine because now they're close contacts. Your child may come to school perfectly fine and somebody in their cohort comes sick. You may have to keep your child home for 2 weeks. So please make arrangements to have childcare. It may happen. It may very well happen where you get a call one night and say, hey, your child was exposed and is a close contact and you need to stay home for 2 weeks. That's part of this whole hybrid model. And I know it's uncomfortable and I know it's inconvenient, but it's absolutely necessary. How much notice can you expect? Well, if we get notification at 6 o'clock at night, we're going to start sending out emails and start communicating, because your child would not be able to come to school not only the next day, but for the next 2 weeks. Up to 14 days. Just to lay out one scenario, if a child is exposed, they go home on quarantine. And if they're home for 10 days and then start to become symptomatic, they have symptoms for 4 days. Well, after 4 days, they get another 10 days. So they would be out of school for 24 days, school days and weekends. And so it can be a substantial amount of time that a student is out of school because of this. If it's quarantine, then it turns out that they become ill with this. If your student has a temperature over 100, keep them home. How long do they have to keep home? For 10 days. Do siblings need to stay home if one is sick? Well, that's a gray line right there. If it's a confirmed positive, absolutely. Absolutely. But we would prefer for you to keep the siblings home as well if you do have a sick child, because we do not know that it's COVID. If you have a COVID test and it comes back negative, your other children could come back. Who do they have with distance learning while at home? Well, we do have distance learning cohorts. That'll be on a classroom by classroom basis. Some teachers may send home some packet work and check in online. We have other teachers that have an AM cohort in person and a PM online. They would just join in on the PM online. So we have to look at it as a case-by-case basis, depending on what the classroom schedule is. How do schools differentiate between seasonal allergies and COVID symptoms? That is a great question. With the warm weather that we're getting right now, we see a lot of runny noses, a lot of stuffy noses. And just because you have a stuffy nose doesn't mean you go out on quarantine. Just because you have a headache one morning doesn't mean you go out on quarantine. But if you have multiple symptoms, you have the headache with a sore throat, you need to stay home. If you have the stuffy nose with a cough, you need to stay home. We understand that seasonal allergies and sometimes headaches come around. Totally get that. But we have to look at fever, body aches, chills, cough, sore throat. If you have any of those, you're going to have to stay home. But if you know that you get seasonal allergies, and that's the only symptom that you have, you're safe to come to school. And everybody gets a headache from time to time, and we understand that. But a headache with any other symptom, you're going to have to stay home and quarantine. How do you report an absence not related to COVID? And that would be to call it in like you normally do. You'd have to call it in. Nutrition services at this time, because we're an AM/PM hybrid, we're still going to offer the seamless summer option. So that's Wednesday and Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Meals for distribution. Because students are only on campus for 2.5 to 3 hours, they can bring a snack. We're not going to send them home with lunch and breakfast the next day. The problem is we don't know how long it's been refrigerated. It's going to be before it'll be refrigerated. When parents come to pick up the meals at the school, we're able to give it right to the parent, and hopefully you're bringing them home and putting them right in the refrigerator. This distribution system will continue through the hybrid model. Like I said, we won't be providing meals on campus, but students will be able to bring a snack and a water bottle, and we'll allot for some times to take a little nutrition break during the school day. So how does school look in a COVID landscape? Well, if you've been watching the news, you've probably seen some videos, and you've seen students sitting in desks with sneeze guards and masks. And that's going to be really similar to what we have here at Knightsen School. We're going to be distance, and we'll have some photos to show you. Some of the parent questions surrounding this topic is, how long will we remain in the hybrid model? I can safely say that we'll remain in the hybrid model through this year. We're already talking about next year, as you can imagine, working with the CDC, the CDPH, and California Department of Education. We have a lot of questions on how are we going to get all of our kids back next year. It would be physically impossible to distance 6 feet and bring back all of our kids. So those questions are still up in the air for the 2021-2022 school year. But as for right now, the hybrid model is here to stay throughout this school year. What will be the protocol for students that are having a hard time wearing masks properly? Like I've mentioned before, that's a no-go. That's a requirement for attending school. If we have students that have special needs or have certain conditions, we'll have to talk about that under a 504 and an IEP accommodation. We do understand that wearing a mask can be difficult. It needs to be something that students get used to because it's a safety concern for all. But students will be expected to wear masks the entire time they're here. If we have students that refuse to wear a mask, that may be a case where they have to go out on distance learning. If a student is doing distance learning, well, they need to come to campus for state testing. That's still up in the air right now. I know that the state is talking about being able to allow kids to test at home. We also will have options for kids to test here at school. We are looking at some legislation that might come down that might change the look of how state testing is run this year. So there'll be more to come on that. But we believe that state testing at this point will be done either at school or at home, depending on what you elect to do. If that changes, we'll be able to notify you. If we have to have distance learning students come in for state testing, we will set up the gymnasiums with socially distanced with Chromebooks and have testing sessions and disinfect before and after each session. Will the librarian be able to keep working at both libraries? Absolutely. Big shout out to Miss Mernon. Even through this pandemic, she's been getting books out to kids and bringing them back, and she's been doing book reads. We've talked to her about how the library will look. She really wants to get in the classrooms and read to the kids, and we can do that socially distancing. We will have an active library program. It may not look like the whole class going to the library. She may have some books on display that students can select. So we will have a library program that's currently evolving right now. And will students be permitted to visit the library and check out books? And that's part of it. We're still looking at that piece right now. We know that it's important to get books into kids' hands, and I'm sure that we'll have an avenue for that to happen. We just have to make sure that we follow the CDC guidelines and make sure that it's safe for both students and staff. And will the librarian be permitted to visit classrooms for read alouds? Absolutely. Absolutely. She's looking forward to coming in and having some carpet time with the students. So here's some photos that we've taken over the past couple of days. You can see we got a first grade class in the upper left. You can see how the desks are spread out, facing forward. We got the sneeze guards. Everybody's distanced. Top right, we have some middle school students that are standing on the dots waiting to go into class. And on the bottom, we have some classrooms that have desks that are lined up with the sneeze guards, and students are being taught online. You can notice that some of the younger kids don't have computers, and the older kids down on the bottom left do, and they're following along with the teacher while she's teaching both online and in person. And here's some more photos from class. Now, our younger kids, we're looking forward to getting paper or pencils to paper. Some of our older kids, they're going to have more of a technological experience in class and do more things online because they're better equipped to handle that. So it all depends on the age level of your student and what the teacher has planned. So we have purchased a large number of Chromebooks. If your student has a school assigned Chromebook, they can bring it with them to school and log on to our system. And if your student has a laptop that they've been using that is your own that you've purchased, they can bring that to school. We do have a waiver saying that if it does break, that it's not necessarily the school's responsibility. We have a guest wireless that students will be able to log on their own personal device. It is content filtered through the school. So this is one of the exceptions that we're making, that kids can bring their device to school and use it as a tool for education. We really want students to be responsible and careful with it, and we are set up to handle that now with all the content filtering.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about what does it look like on school during the day, and now we're here in the school time, and what does that look like? Again, students will need to exit the campus. We've looked at the school maps, but we'll also, I'm sure, have those posted to our websites, shared out with you, making sure they're exiting campus the way that they came in. We need to make sure students leave as soon as possible. As soon as, if they're riding the bus, they're going to load up and they're going to go. We need to make sure that we have time to disinfect everything. We need to make sure students, again, we are lessening the likelihood of intermingling. And so again, parents, please make sure that whatever arrangements you make with your students, that you are here as close to be on time as possible to be able to pick them up. Dismissal times may be approximate. Again, limiting the number of students exiting campus at any given time. Your teacher will be able to let you know about those if the dismissal time changes, if it's a little bit early. So parents and visitors, this is going to be something that's new for our district, I know. Again, we really have to look at who we have coming onto campus and the length of time that we have people. This really falls back on that contact tracing protocol. So to limit the exposure on campus, the risk there, again, those mitigation factors, really only those who are essential to the functioning of school are going to be allowed on campus. That includes personnel that we have here, any contractors for work that we're doing, guest teachers, or others that may be deemed essential by us as administrators. If you are visiting campus, please make sure that you report straight to the office so that way we can go through our contact screening protocols. And again, if you're a visitor, you're going to have your temperature checked, everything going through our COVID-19 questionnaire. Unfortunately, we are not able to have parents come onto campus. So if you need to pick up your student early, you need to drop off medication or supplies, just contact the office for next steps from our school secretary. But parents, we will need to say goodbye to our kids at those entrance and exit points. So special education and support services, some of the questions we got were surrounding our support services for those families who are utilizing them or students that may need them. So what mental health resources are we implementing for students? This is something that's really evolving. We have a really great school psychologist. We have really great intervention teachers. And actually a lot of our staff are sharing out strategies throughout campus. I mean, every day they're sending emails back and forth. I found this article, I found this great strategy. So we're really looking forward to implementing more of those mental health resources for students. Honestly, as we're moving through a COVID landscape, that's going to be something that I know is going to be at the forefront for all educators, because being out on distance learning for almost a year definitely will take a toll, and we need to make sure we have programs and resources in place for students. So that is an ever evolving topic there. How does going back affect additional services that we offer, such as speech or intervention or English language or technology assistance? These are things that we are working out with our service providers. They are looking at when students are scheduled for cohorts, and they may need to adjust times. Depending on the type of service it is, it may remain online. So you may have a student who's in person coming to school, let's say in the morning, and they may have an afternoon responsibility to sign in at home to attend an intervention time or attend that language support time or speech or what have you. So just know that if you're receiving extra services, those support personnel will be able to reach out to you to let you know what that schedule looks like for your student.
Daycare. I know that we've received a few questions about daycare, and it's been a big part of our program for a long time here at Knightsen School. Unfortunately, in a hybrid model, we are not able to offer daycare during the school day. We have to remain in stable cohorting, meaning that your children, your students have to stay within their group. And if you think about the way that daycare works, is in typical times we would have students from multiple grade levels from both schools congregate in one room. Well, if one of those students are sick and goes back to the next day their classroom, we have a potential of infecting multiple cohorts across both schools. If we get what constitutes an outbreak through the CDC guidelines, we have to shut the entire school down. At minimum, we'd have to shut down a couple of different cohorts. So we have to be very, very, very careful about the stable cohorting piece. And daycare, unfortunately, on a school campus does not follow along with that stable cohort. When on-campus daycares reopens, will we have a half day versus full day? As of right now in the hybrid model, we're not going to offer daycare for the reasons that I just explained. As we move back into a full day model, we'll have to look at what the CDC guidelines say with that. So I know it's a passionate part of school that parents are really, they like our daycare program, and I understand that it opens up the day so parents can be free and go to work, but it's unfortunately it's not something that we're able to offer at this point. And looking ahead, will students return to their original school in fall if they've had to move sites? Well, as Ms. Polk has described earlier, our first consideration was to keep students with their teachers, and second of all, keep them at their site. So in the rare instance that we did have to move students, I'm sorry that we did have to move schools. I know it's not ideal, but there's nothing ideal about this situation. We're going to do the best we can to get students back into their home sites. And once again, next year, we don't know how it's going to look yet. We're still waiting for guidance from the CDC on how we can reopen schools. And we have to see what tier we're in, because that largely dictates how we can congregate and how many kids we can fit into a classroom. We're going to remain in the hybrid model for the rest of the school year. And moving back to a normal model, when might this happen? Well, one thing that I do know is that for next school year, 21-22, we're probably going to have to wear these, unfortunately. We may be able to bump up the numbers in class. We may be able to sit a little bit closer, but these are here to stay, unfortunately. Events will be determined by site and by health guidelines. Like many things with this pandemic, the guidelines are constantly changing. As we learn more, we have to maneuver with it, and that's where I think the Knightsen Elementary School District has been at an advantage. Being a small school district, we've been able to keep up on our communication and really evolve to meet the demands of this pandemic. I really feel for some of our school districts that have, thousands and tens of thousands of students, it's a very, very daunting task to make the big changes to where Ms. Polk and I and our staff can literally look at it as a student by student case. We've been fortunate for that, but I wish I had more looking into next year. But I do know right now, as of March 8th, we're proud to bring back TK3. We need your help, folks. If your child's sick, keep them home. Screen them before they come to school. have arrangements to have somebody pick your child up. If they do become sick at school, we'll need somebody to come pick them up. And also make daycare arrangements, because at anytime, it just takes one sick individual here to put a whole cohort out into quarantine. And that can be for 2 full weeks, 14 days. So I know it'll be inconvenient, but that's the price of coming back in a hybrid model. And we want to do everything we can to support our students and staff and families. We're one of the first schools in the Far East County to be able to open, but that doesn't mean that it's a full reopening and it's free and clear. We may have to roll it back a bit depending on how this goes. Vaccines are becoming more readily available. That's going to be a key to us staying reopened. Sports will start coming back, but with that, this has a potential to spread, and we got to stay in front of it. So it's a community effort to keep our schools open. Ms. Polk, do you have any closing comments?
I just really want to thank all of you as parents. I know we've had some of our learning loss students who've been returning this week, and they've been amazing in following the school protocols. And I know a lot of that starts at home. And so we really want to thank our parents for joining us in this community effort. Like we keep trying to emphasize, it takes all of us, all of us at school, all of us at home, the personal choices we're making and everything else. So I just really want to thank our families and also thank our staff, because a lot of them are doubling in that role, right? We have staff working here that are also parents who have to watch for their own students as well. So looking forward to having our students come back and to try to get back to some semblance of normal.
Yeah. Okay, Knightsen families, take care, be well, and hey, go wash those hands. Have a good night. Bye.